everybody. Welcome and thank you for tuning in today. My name is Talita and I am a Middle East human rights researcher at the Global Human Rights Defense. And today I am honored to be joined by Antoine, who recently completed his mandate as a Human Rights and Solidarity Coordinator at the European Students' Union. So yeah, I cannot stress how valuable the work that you do is. So without further ado, I'm gonna start with an introduction. So Antoine, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and what you used to do.
Yeah, hi Talita, thanks for having me here. My name is Antoine Bakhash. I come originally from Aleppo, Syria. I've been based in Belgium for about 8 years now, and I'm based in Leuven, Belgium. And I was, as you mentioned, the previous Human Rights and Solidarity Coordinator at the European Students' Union. Besides different topics I've worked on recently, like migration, integration, inclusion policies in Europe, and I'm recognized as a refugee here in Belgium.
Hey, thank you for your introduction. So yeah, I'm gonna hop straight into it. So can you tell us a bit about what motivated you to get involved in the European Student Union, specifically within your role as a Human Rights and Solidarity Coordinator?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I am also a student. Besides being the previous human rights coordinator, but so this is also like one of the motivations that gave me an extra push to go for it, because of me being a student, me having to go through some policies, and of course what made me realize a lot of things is that there is still a lot of work to be done for students from different backgrounds, from specific backgrounds. I was the representative of the Flemish Union of Students the year before, where I was engaged in working on inclusive policies for international students living and studying in Belgium at the Dutch-speaking universities and institutions. And through this, I got in touch with the European Students' Union, and then I realized that actually there is so much in common. Like the challenges we have on Flemish, Belgian level, we have on European level. And as someone who was studying, I mean, I've studied also in Syria engineering, and when I moved to Belgium, I did my best to have access to higher education, and yet I'm one of the most privileged ones that managed to actually have that access because of some because maybe sometimes I was in the right place, because I had a sort of network that helped me to get the right information and to have the right documents at the right time. So I was like, not everyone has this privilege, and I know how difficult it is for refugee students when they come to another country to start their studies and to continue their education. So all this together gave me enough motivation to go for it, and I'm happy I did.
Okay, and yeah, I'm glad to see that you also overcame those barriers and that you are now pursuing higher education. And yeah, that's really important that people also following in your footsteps in the future can also have that access as well. And yeah, so also given your personal connection to Syria and your background coming from there, having previously studied there and had to, you know, change up your whole life and start over in Leuven. Yeah, can you share some personal experiences that has you know driven you to be more committed to human rights advocacy now?
I mean, of course, the situation in Syria was and still somehow very dramatic in different ways. I've lived most of the part of the war. I left Syria in 2015, so I left after 4 years of going through the war in Aleppo. and before that, I was also a student doing my studies. I mean, I did primary school, the high school, and so on. And I've seen the different challenges every year during the war, and how the war was getting worse and worse. But I also believed so much back then when I was in Syria in one thing, that education is the key to change people's realities, my reality as well as so many people's realities. With no matter which background you have, we need to work on one thing, that is to make higher education accessible for people. Of course, the situation of human rights during the war was very bad. I mean, also with I have also Christian background there, so as a minority there, like I also had to face different challenges besides the war, and I can imagine for also in general for different types of minorities, it was also more challenging. Like if we think of LGBT minorities, if we think of religious minorities, besides uh, the Christians, but also within Islam, of course. So a lot of different groups had to suffer a lot there. Um, the situation during the war, as a student, was besides the bombs and the usual things that a lot of people have seen on media, was also yes, that there was no access to electricity, no access to sometimes even clean water, no access to internet connection, which means no access to good research, or to have a proper academic career there as well, which limits, of course, your chances of succeeding, which limits your chances of making the best out of your time at the university. Besides, of course, a lot of people, I mean, didn't live in cities where there were no universities. There were at some point no public transportation and so on. Different challenges, different realities. A lot of people, including myself, studied on the light of a candle to pass some exams. This is like small, like small example of sometimes how challenging things were. And one of the main things, of course, that NT today plays a major part is that there's no, or for sure not enough psychological support for a lot of students going through the war, and now the war is um, is having new shapes, at least. Today, the human rights situation in Syria is, of course, very questionable. Is, of course, far from perfection, and far from what a lot of people want to achieve there. Like people, we hear about Syria way less on in the media, on the social media, but at the same time, the way that people are suffering is still the same. The suffer is still very big. Today, people, I mean, it is bad to say and actually hard to say to say a group of people got used to the war, but what is also very difficult is that people today, even if the war has been normalized in a way, that people still cannot afford their living, to have bread every day, to have enough of food, to feed their children, their families. Still, access to electricity, water is very limited. Medications as well, hospitals, and so on. Maybe we have heard on the news that ISIS is not in Syria anymore, but I'm quite sure that the ideology of extremism is still visible in the society. From what I've heard, I still have some friends there. A lot of young people, unfortunately, want to leave Syria, not only because of the war, but also because of feeling like just a number there. That even if one day something happens to them, they are nothing but a number. Even if they would be included in some numbers. So as young people, young generation, not only in Syria, I think everywhere we like to be involved, we like to feel useful to the society where we are. And this is why a lot of people are also saying that I don't feel safe, I have no future. um, and for me, I can be beneficial to Syria or whatever country that is, but not necessarily by being in Syria. So so yeah, I am one of the luckiest, of course, to have managed to leave the country, but I cannot imagine now how difficult it is for a lot of my friends who are still there, trying to study, trying to finalize their studies, or even to have a job, or even to be safe and to be sure that they will make it to the next day. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that thorough explanation. And yeah, so this was already leading on to my follow-up question, which was, can you give us a bit of an overview about the situation in Syria right now? And you already touched upon a lot of elements, but how would you say that things have changed from back then when you left and now? You said you're still in contact with a lot of your friends as well. Do they have a little bit more access now? Like you said, are they able to move on with their lives a bit and get an education? How have things evolved?
I mean, yeah, as I've mentioned before, when I was there, there was, I mean, the war had different shape. The war was in a different level. It was more about some areas getting more bombed, some areas having, yeah, where you'd see a lot of people were killed and still getting killed. Now it's less intense, yes, in some regions in Syria, not everywhere, because in other places it still is quite intense. But for the major part of Syria, it's less of the um, the the normal war that we would be normally seeing on TV, but now it's again the economical effect. Of course, also next to the corruption there, but also besides the sanctions that have been imposed on Syria, all this together makes it very difficult for people, even the rich is having today difficult time to survive in Syria. So I cannot even think of someone from the middle class or even less, how they are able to afford going to even send their children to public school. This is also very challenging. So to talk about higher education, I think it's one step ahead and way more difficult for someone to say I will be committed for 5 years, not to be working and to be studying, because you need to have also the sources to do so. But also, like until today in Syria, if you happen to be um, a man and then who has a brother, you have to go to the army once you finish your studies.
Mm-hmm.
Which means a lot of people during the war were and still are afraid to be called to go to join the army once they would graduate, or even sometimes before.
Mm-hmm.
There's always this fear for a lot of guys there to go to the army, and even no matter what your political background is, not a lot of people are willing um, to to do so and to give up on, I don't know, 10 years of their life to go to the army. So there's a lot of barriers, let's say, and a lot of difficulties. I can like it's also quite similar to the situation in Ukraine, where also a lot of male students were banned from leaving the country at some point in order to join the army, and therefore they had to stop their higher education for a while.
Yes. Okay. And how would you say that this now ties into the work that you do, the work that you did as a human rights coordinator? So, like, how did you carry on these perspectives and experiences that you endured, and how, that's influenced the work that you do?
Um, I mean, as human rights coordinator, that last year, actually, like my mandate finished a couple of months ago, so still until the mid of 2023. Um, it was, of course, not only my decision, but it was something that the EC, together with the presidency and the coordinators, we all noticed that we need to invest more in in access to higher education for refugee students, or for students living in countries where it's not safe, where they are at risk. Um, I think it was necessary for me to invest a lot of time in this, doing some advocacy work um, um, for refugee students, not only but also, as I've mentioned before, students at risk living in those countries. So you have two types. You have sometimes the students living in the conflict zone who are at risk, and you have other students who are now, let's say, safe living in another country, but yet they are trying to have access to the higher education. Today we face a lot of lack in scholarships, a lot of lack in student visas being issued and given to certain students. So if you happen to be, I don't know, student in Yemen, and you want to continue your studies, your higher education studies in in Europe, let's say, it will be almost impossible for you to get a visa, because of lack of. I mean, first of all, because there are no embassies to issue visas, so it's impossible for those students to apply for the visa, to go do the appointment. And there are lack of scholarships, so it's again very difficult for those who manage to have the appointment to make an appointment to even have the funds to go to the other country. And third, there's a big lack of policies when it comes to uh, in, to policies that support and understand the situation of students with a migration background and refugee background. A lot of, I mean, quite often, if someone would come from a country where they have already the diploma, it will be very difficult to recognize that diploma. It will be very difficult to inform those students of their rights. It will be difficult to assess those students in the different steps in until they get that that access. So quite often they have to go through language courses that they have to find themselves. They have to fund it themselves as well. They have to again redo all the years that they have already done. There's not enough understanding yet of how can we both in European society benefit from the experience that a lot of students have built back home here. So quite often they have to redo everything. Sorry. So yeah, there are different challenges, and as human rights coordinator, I've um, tried and did my best to bring this conversation back on table with the students, with the student representatives, first of all, but also with the different policymakers at different European institutions. Um, and I think there's still a lot of work to do. But first of all, we need to raise awareness. First of all, people need to have a good enough understanding of what is this situation and how can we help in order to make change happen.
Yes, so that actually perfectly segues into my next question, which is how do you raise awareness for the challenges that these students are facing?
I mean, it can be very simple by going and talking and telling people. I think nowadays we talk about migration almost every single day on social media, almost every single day on TV channels. We see a lot of politicians using the refugee card, the migration card, almost in every single debate. So we can also raise awareness and tell, look, so you talk about this, but here are some reality checks, facts about situations that we can make it better for them and for our society as well. I think first of all we also need to include the refugee students or the student at risk into this conversation, because otherwise we will not be able to know how we can make it better for them, and what the real needs that they are in need for. So once we can bring both the policymakers, the refugee students, together with higher education institutions, I think we can start moving forward. But we need also to have an let's say we need to have an accepting system to be flexible enough to change. And here also comes the role of students like me, like you, like a lot of other students living all over the world, having enough interest or having also the will to be involved in those topics, because change can never happen without some pressure being put on the policymakers. Today, I feel that by talking to a lot of European students, that there is that interest, that there is that will, and also it's also beneficial in the end to the European society as well. If I'm talking about migration and integration, then from my experience, it would be European society. It is beneficial for the European society to have um, to help those students to have access to higher education in order to empower the society where they live and to move forward everyone together with the society.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And I have one last question for you. So, what would your message be to maybe specifically because you're from Syria? Your message to the Syrian youth. How would you? Yeah, just a message to them. What would you say to encourage?
Yeah, that's. I mean, I have a lot of messages, I guess, but if I would say something like, no matter where um that Syrian youth is, if it's in Syria, if it's abroad, if it's in Europe, I don't know, if it's in the Middle East, still, I know how hard things have been. I know how hard things have been for a lot of nationals from different countries where there are conflicts as well. Um, but keep believing in yourself. It sounds very easy, um, but sometimes you would realize that society wouldn't necessarily believe in you. But if you have this fire in you, that light in you that tells you, yes, you can, give it a try, a second try, and a third try. It never hurts. Um, and, and I'm sure that no matter what this youth will be doing in these regions, that it will anyways bring good to the society where he lives, and to Syria as well, and to themselves. You're never alone. Speak up, open up. I'm sure that there are a lot of beautiful souls around to be willing to listen and to support and to help. So yeah, I hope that we can all build a beautiful future for the societies where we live and for the countries where we come from.
Thank you for that beautiful message. Is there anything else that you would like to share or add before we end this interview?
No, I'd like to thank you for this interview, for having me here, and for giving for using this spot as well to put more attention on refugee students, student activism, and conflicts in the Middle East, and for the work you do. Thank you, Talita.
Yes, and thank you as well also for the work that you do, and I'm wishing you all the best in your next steps. And yes, thank you.
Thank you.